Never did I imagine my life would come apart in such a way. At 52, I found myself in a serene cadence, my days woven with the gentle pulse of routine, the solace of the known. My husband, Tom, frequently traveled for work, transforming our suburban home into a relic of our history rather than a vibrant living space. The children had matured, embarking on their own journeys, leaving me with an abundance of time to reflect, to meander through recollections and ponder where the vibrancy had faded away. Ethan, my nephew, was the sole disturbance in my otherwise tranquil waters. At 25, he was full of life, spending the summer with us as he contemplated his next moves after college. His presence infused the house with an unusual energy, something I hadn't recognized I was longing for. Ethan had changed from the boy I once knew. He was more than just the tall, awkward boy who would plead for additional cookies at family get-togethers. He had an undeniable allure now. Lofty, with defined cheekbones and eyes that appeared to conceal mysteries of their own. He moved with a confidence that bordered on predation, making the atmosphere feel denser in his presence. It caught my attention right from the first week he came, lounging on the couch in a snug t-shirt, his laughter echoing through the space as we chatted about both trivial and profound matters. I reassured myself it was merely pride, a relative's fondness for her nephew who had matured into adulthood. Yet, beneath the surface, I was aware that I was deceiving myself. It began in a seemingly harmless way. As the night deepened, I found myself in the kitchen, filling a glass with wine to relax and let the day's worries fade away. The house lay in stillness, Tom off on yet another business journey. Ethan strolled in bare-chested, his hair still glistening from a recent shower. I felt a sudden catch in my breath, and I reprimanded myself for it. He took a beer from the fridge and leaned against the counter, just within reach, allowing me to catch the subtle scent of cedar from his body wash. We conversed, discussing his aspirations, the destinations he yearned to explore, but an intangible presence lingered, something left unsaid. His gaze held on to me for just a moment too long, and I sensed a warmth rising in my cheeks. I chuckled it away, attributing it to the wine, yet my heart was pounding fiercely. In the days that followed, an unsettling sensation lingered, as if he were observing my every move. Not overtly, but through fleeting looks, when I'd lean down to tend to the plants or reach for a stretch after a tiring day. I'd notice him glancing my way, and he'd offer that slow, knowing smile that sent a flutter through my stomach. I convinced myself it was just my imagination, that I was merely reflecting my own unease onto him. But then arrived the night that transformed everything. The evening was thick with humidity, the sort that wraps around you like a second skin. In the sanctuary of my bedroom, with the door left slightly ajar, I found myself changing into something lighter to combat the sweltering heat. I assumed the house was empty. Ethan mentioned he was going out with friends. As I removed my blouse, I sensed it, the heavy presence of an observing eye. My heart raced, and I glanced toward the door. In the soft glow of the hallway, Ethan lingered in the shadows. His gaze was fixed on me, fierce, unrepentant. I ought to have shouted, shielded myself, insisted he go away. However, I did not. For a brief instant, I remained motionless, my skin tingling beneath his gaze. And then, oh, how I wished for divine intervention, I experienced a surge, a shadowy, illicit wave that left my legs trembling. He remained still, silent. I didn't either. The stillness crackled with an unidentifiable energy. Then, with deliberate slowness, he advanced, crossing the boundary into my room. My breath caught in my throat as he paused mere inches from me, his gaze probing into my own. I didn't mean to, he murmured, his voice deep and gravelly. Yet his tone held no remorse, only an insatiable desire. I ought to have distanced myself, to have said that this was not right, that we were unable to proceed. Instead, I sensed my body gravitating toward him, compelled by an inexplicable force. His hand grazed my arm, a delicate caress that sent a tremor through my being. "You're beautiful," he murmured, and those words shattered something within me. For years, I had not experienced beauty, not in the way he described it, as if I were something meant to be consumed. My thoughts shouted for me to halt, to consider Tom, the family, and the boundaries we were on the verge of crossing. Yet my body had different plans. I extended my hand, my fingertips brushing against his chest, sensing the warmth of his skin. His breath hitched, and before I could retreat, his lips pressed against mine. The kiss ignited with intensity, urgent, desperate, as if we had both been yearning for it all along. His hands gripped my waist, drawing me nearer, and I surrendered to him, every thought eclipsed by the rapid beat of my heart. It was misguided, undeniably misguided, yet it seemed like the sole thing that resonated in that instant. We made our way to the bed, a mix of entwined limbs and hushed breaths, and for a brief moment, I considered allowing myself just this once. Yet, the harsh truth came tumbling down. The unmistakable sound of tires crunching on gravel. Tom has arrived home ahead of schedule. A wave of panic washed over me, and I shoved Ethan aside, my breath coming in ragged gasps. His eyes were frantic, begging for understanding, yet I turned away, my voice quivering with uncertainty. "You must keep this a secret," I murmured. "Promise me." He nodded, yet there was a flicker in his gaze, an unspoken hint that this was far from finished, that we had merely scratched the surface of what lay ahead. Upon hearing Tom's footsteps ascending the stairs, I adjusted my attire, my hands trembling with anticipation. Ethan glided out of the room, as quiet as a whisper in the night. I managed a smile as Tom entered, completely unaware, inquiring about my day. Yet within, I was caught in a whirlwind. What have I done? What was I turning into? And most troubling of all, what was it that drove my desire for more? The days following that night became a haze of remorse and desire, a delicate balance I navigated with each inhale. Every time I glanced at Tom, the burden of my actions pressed down on me, his gentle gaze reflecting the depth of my treachery. Yet, every time Ethan moved past me in the house, his presence felt like an undertow, drawing me deeper into its depths. I would feel the slightest touch of his arm as he reached for something, or notice how his gaze lingered when he believed I wasn't aware, and my body would betray me once more, a rush of warmth, a rapid heartbeat. I convinced myself it was an error, a fleeting lapse in judgment that would not repeat itself. Yet, beneath the surface, I understood I was anticipating it, yearning for the next flicker of inspiration. I attempted to maintain my space. I occupied my time with errands, tending to the garden, anything to keep from being alone with him. Yet Ethan possessed an uncanny ability to locate me, as if he could feel the turmoil battling within me. One afternoon, I found myself in the backyard, kneeling in the soil, planting tulip bulbs as a way to occupy my mind. The sun blazed overhead, droplets of sweat forming on my skin, and I sensed his presence before catching sight of him. His shadow loomed above me, and I glanced up to see him there, a glass of iced tea grasped in his hand, his shirt clinging to his form from the oppressive heat. "I figured you could use a drink," he remarked, his tone effortlessly laid back, bordering on nonchalant. I grasped the glass, our fingers lightly grazing each other, and the spark of that contact left me momentarily breathless. We never addressed that night, not in a straightforward manner. Instead, we circled the topic with light conversation, discussing the weather, the blooms, his search for employment. Yet each word seemed weighted, each silence thick with the unspoken truths between us. He lingered on the grass close by, observing my efforts, and I sensed his gaze following the line of my neck, the way my sundress fluttered with each motion. "You have a real talent for this," he remarked, indicating the garden. "Making things grow." His tone carried a sense of purity, yet the way he articulated it, slow and intentional, sent a shiver through me. I chuckled, attempting to ease the strain, but it emerged unsteady. That evening, Tom was back at home, and we gathered around the table for dinner. I believed that the familiarity of it would anchor me, Tom's calm voice, the sound of forks clinking, the gentle rhythm of everyday life. Yet there was Ethan, sitting across the table, and each time our gazes locked, it felt as though an unspoken connection surged between us. He'd offer a subtle smirk, and I'd feel the heat rise to my cheeks. Tom, unaware, rambled on about his latest project, while I nodded and smiled, my thoughts drifting back to the sensation of Ethan's lips, the warmth of his hands. I despised myself for it, yet the shame only intensified the excitement. Later, after Tom went to bed, I discovered Ethan in the living room, lounging on the couch, the TV throwing flickering shadows over his face. I ought to have retreated upstairs, shut myself in. Instead, I settled into my seat, maintaining a deliberate distance, gripping a glass of wine as if it were my only anchor. "We need to talk," I murmured, my voice scarcely rising above a whisper. He glanced my way, his face a mask of mystery. "What are we discussing?" he asked, but the sparkle in his eyes revealed that he understood precisely what I was implying. I struggled to articulate my thoughts, to convey that it was wrong, that we needed to put an end to this, that it simply couldn't continue. Yet he moved nearer, his knee grazing against mine, and the atmosphere around us became charged. "You sensed it as well, didn't you?" he said, his voice gentle, inviting. That night, it wasn't just me. I felt the urge to refute it, to shout that he was mistaken, yet my silence spoke volumes. He extended his hand, his fingers brushing against my wrist, and I recoiled, not out of reluctance, but from an overwhelming desire. "We can't," I said, though my voice faltered, revealing my inner turmoil. He leaned closer, his breath a gentle warmth brushing against my ear. "So, what brings you here?" he whispered. Before I could respond, his lips brushed against my neck, a gentle, intentional kiss that sent a thrill coursing through me. My determination shattered, and I faced him, our lips colliding in a fervent, yearning kiss. It felt like the initial encounter, yet more fervent, more daring, as though we both understood that our time to feign was dwindling. His hands roamed freely, gripping my waist, tangling in my hair, drawing me nearer until every inch of space vanished between us. The warmth radiated from him, a palpable urgency that silenced the frantic voice in my mind urging me to halt. We descended to the floor, the coarse carpet brushing against my skin, and for a fleeting moment, nothing else mattered, only him, only us, only this illicit flame. However, a sudden creak from the stairs jolted me back to the present moment. I stood still, my heart racing, and shoved him aside, hurriedly getting back on my feet. It was merely the house adjusting, or perhaps Tom shifting in his slumber, but the dread was a chilling jolt. Ethan gazed at me, his breath quickening, his eyes filled with desire. "This isn't over," he declared, his tone firm and resolute, a vow hanging in the air. I shook my head, tears pricking at the corners of my eyes. "It must be," I murmured, though deep down, I questioned it myself. I retreated to my room, securing the door behind me, my body still resonating with the echo of his touch. The following morning, a note lay beneath my door, scrawled in Ethan's uneven script, "I'm not sorry." My heart raced, caught in a whirlwind of apprehension and longing. I crumpled the note, yet I held on to it. I was unable to. As I prepared my coffee, I noticed Tom's phone vibrating on the counter. A message from his sister, Ethan's mother, appeared. "I've heard Ethan's been behaving oddly. Is everything all right over there?" My veins turned to ice. Did anyone witness anything? Was she aware? The walls seemed to constrict around me, and I understood that this secret was already eluding my grasp. The message from Ethan's mother lingered in my thoughts, an urgent signal I couldn't dismiss. I removed it from Tom's phone before he had the chance to notice, my hands shaking as I reassured myself it was trivial, merely a mother's concern, not doubt. Yet the fear lingered, an ever-present shadow that trailed me through each space. I found myself unable to eat or sleep, my nerves stretched thin, teetering on the edge of collapse. Ethan, however, appeared completely unbothered. He glided through the house with an effortless assurance, his gaze locking onto mine with a warmth that caused my determination to falter. I despised the depth of my longing for him, the way my body yearned for his presence while my mind shouted warnings of impending disaster. The following day, I attempted to confront him, finding him in the garage absorbed in his work on an old bike. The atmosphere was heavy with the scent of oil and dust, and I spoke in hushed tones, fearful that Tom might catch wind of our conversation from inside the house. We must halt, I declared, my voice cutting through the air, filled with urgency. Your mother is inquiring. This is going to ruin everything. He cleaned his hands with a rag, his eyes unwavering, a hint of amusement flickering within them. Do you really believe I'm concerned about her opinion? He said, moving in closer. Do you really believe I have any concern for any of them? His voice was soft and personal, sending a shiver through me against my will. This concerns our journey. There is no us, I retorted, though my voice trembled, and he perceived my vulnerability instantly. He closed the distance, his hand grazing my cheek, and I stood still, torn between the urge to push him away and the desire to draw him nearer. You're not telling the truth, he murmured, his lips nearly brushing against mine, allowing me to sense his warm breath. You want this as much as I do. I longed to shout that he was mistaken, yet the truth betrayed me, searing in my chest. I averted my gaze, my heart racing, and hurried back to the house, securing myself in the bathroom to douse my face with cold water. I gazed at my reflection, rosy cheeks, untamed eyes, and hardly recognized the figure staring back at me. That night, Tom was immersed in his work, and the house seemed to close in around me, each creak and shadow heightening my sense of unease. In the kitchen, I busied myself with the dishes, seeking distraction, when Ethan emerged, as quiet as a specter. He remained silent, positioned behind me, so near that I could sense his warmth. Don't, I whispered, my voice a mere breath, yet I remained rooted in place. His hands traced my hips, measured and intentional, while I clutched the counter, my knuckles turning pale. Please, just say the word, he whispered, his breath warm against my ear. I was unable to. I did not. Instead, I pivoted in his embrace, and we crashed together once more, a whirlwind of desire and abandon. This moment felt distinct, intense, urgent, as if we both understood that our opportunities were dwindling. We stumbled into the living room, garments thrown aside in a whirlwind, the universe shrinking to the sensation of his touch, the echo of his uneven breaths filling the air. It was impulsive but foolish, yet in that instant, I was oblivious to the repercussions, to Tom, to everything except the blaze engulfing us. We found ourselves enveloped in it, entwined on the couch, when the front door softly clicked open. Tom's voice rang out, bright and carefree, unaware of everything around him. Hello, I've returned home ahead of schedule. Time came to a standstill. Ethan stood still, his eyes filled with shock, and I pushed him away, hurriedly reaching for my clothes as a wave of panic surged within me. Remain here, I whispered urgently, tugging on my shirt as I made my way toward the hallway. Ethan seized my wrist, his gaze intense. We're not finished, he murmured, yet I broke away, my heart racing as I mustered a smile and stepped out to greet Tom. He stood in the foyer, loosening his tie, recounting the events of his day. I nodded, my voice strained, hoping he wouldn't catch sight of my messy hair or the warmth creeping across my cheeks. Challenging day? He inquired, a crease forming on his forehead as he gazed at me. I chuckled, my laughter a bit too shrill, and attributed it to a headache. He appeared to accept it, making his way upstairs to shower, while I leaned against the wall, my legs trembling. Ethan stepped out of the living room, quiet, his gaze intense with an emotion I couldn't decipher, perhaps anger, or perhaps a sense of defiance. This isn't over, he repeated, and I felt the urge to shout at him to go away, to vanish, but the words remained trapped inside me. The following morning, I received a message from Ethan's mother, we need to talk. I'm coming over today. A wave of unease washed over me. Uncertainty loomed over me, and the weight of dread was almost unbearable. I discovered Ethan in the kitchen, casually munching on cereal as if everything was perfectly fine. Your mother is on her way, I said, my voice quaking with apprehension. What did you say to her? He shrugged, infuriatingly composed. Nothing. But perhaps it's time she learned the truth. A chill coursed through me. What did you know? I insisted, yet he merely grinned, that languid, perilous grin, and replied, everything. She arrived that afternoon, her expression etched with concern. Tom was at work, thankfully, yet the atmosphere in the room was thick with tension. She settled me into my seat, her tone soft yet inquisitive. "Ethan's been unusual," she remarked, cloaked in mystery. I was informed by a neighbor that they spotted him lurking in the shadows after dark. "Is there something happening?" My throat felt parched, thoughts swirling as I searched for deception. I stumbled over my words, mentioning stress and his transition to life post-college, but her gaze sharpened, as if she could peer right into my thoughts. Ethan sat across from us, quiet, his face a mask of inscrutability, and I felt an overwhelming urge to shout at him to assist me, to utter something, anything at all. Then she revealed the shocking truth. "I discovered a note in his room," she remarked, extracting a wrinkled piece of paper. My heart froze as I recognized his handwriting, the same uneven strokes as the note he had left behind. She read it aloud, her voice trembling. "I can't stop thinking about her. It's wrong, but I don't care." The room whirled around me. Her gaze met mine, probing and intense, and I sensed the very foundations crumbling around us. "Whom is he referring to?" she asked, and I found myself gasping for air, my mind a blank slate. Ethan's eyes locked onto mine, unwavering and unrepentant, and in that instant, I realized he wouldn't come to my rescue. I can't recall my words, just a desperate justification, a denial that felt empty even to my own ears. She departed, still skeptical, vowing to have a private conversation with Ethan. The moment she left, I confronted him, my voice a seething whisper. "What on earth were you considering?" He moved in, fearless, his voice a mere whisper. I found myself reflecting on my weariness of concealing. "I want you, and I don't care who knows." I pushed him aside, tears flowing down my cheeks. "You'll destroy me," I said, yet he merely shook his head. "You're already ruined," he remarked, then turned and left. That night, I lay beside Tom, his steady breathing a stark contrast to the turmoil swirling in my mind. I was aware that it was just a question of time until the truth emerged, until all that I had constructed fell apart. Ethan had a week left, yet the harm was already inflicted. I had stepped over a boundary that was irreparable, and the most troubling aspect? Even now, aware of the price, I found myself uncertain about any feelings of regret. The recollection of his touch, his voice, lingered within me, an unquenchable dark flame that refused to fade. As I gazed at the ceiling, a single question lingered in my mind. When the truth finally emerged, would I flee from it or welcome it with open arms?